Alrighty, welcome everybody to the 171st edition of the MMA Circus here on bloodyelbow.com and live on YouTube. My name is Nick Baldwin. I'm your host as always, and joining us as our guest co-host for the very first time this week, usually it's Jed Meshew, but this time we got the other side, the other half of Missed Fist. He is a journalist for MMAfighting.com. It is Alex K. Lee. Alex, how are you?
I'm good, Nick. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I am the Yang to Jed's Yin, or the Yin to his Yang. Viewers that are used to Jed's powerful forward opinions will be. I hope they don't expect that from me. I'm more on the other side. I consider myself very moderate, and I'm a bit of a fence sitter sometimes. So I don't know if I'll bring the same heat as Jed, but I try and bring my own perspective of things.
So you've gotten to know Jed fairly well since doing this weekly column with him and just working at fighting over the past year. So who's the better person? I would think you probably. Is it
human being?
For sure. Yeah, human being.
Oh, me. There's no question. It's me.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Jed can be a pretty mean person sometimes. I'm not going to lie.
He is, he's an insanely talented man. He knows MMA, and again, has a perspective on it unlike any other. But he's got some opinions that are so strong, and when we work together, it's like sometimes we butt heads, but also at the end of the day, magic happens. So what can you say?
Yeah. So you're based in Toronto. Usually I like to start the show off with a bit of weather talk. Some of our listeners have gotten used to it, so kind of got to continue it, even though it's not exactly the best way you'd want to start off a podcast. Toronto right now, we're in the middle of summer. Everything's going well, I think, weather-wise.
Yeah, we're finally getting some decent weather for going out. It was scorching for a while there, which is great if you're like me and you're trying to exercise and just sweat a lot. Perfect. But I know people who are just kind of trying to go out and have a nice day, and it's just been horrible. It's just been so hot. So I think we're kind of turning the corner a little bit. I don't want to jinx it, but
yeah, and I guess as far as the winter goes, it's not quite as bad as Winnipeg, but you got to enjoy the heat while it lasts because it does get a little chilly in Toronto. So.
How's the Winnipeg summer? I always hear the Winnipeg summers are beautiful. I've only been there in the winter. I've never been summer.
Yeah, Winnipeg summer. People hate Winnipeg. People just say, "Oh, it's in the Arctic tundra the whole time, year round, 24/7." But honestly, during the summer, it's not too bad. Let's see. Right now, it's a little cloudy, but we're sitting at 22 degrees Celsius. I mean, it's not too hot, not too cold. Sort of right in the middle. I think it's a good temperature. Once in a while, we get really hot. Not quite Las Vegas. I had to. It took a couple days to get used to Vegas. When I was down there earlier this month. I mean, people say it's a dry heat, but it's still 45 degrees out. I mean, it's still crazy hot. So yeah, Winnipeg's all right. I'm enjoying it because I know minus 40 is on its way.
Yes, it's always just around the corner out of the peg. Yeah.
But I guess I will escape the Winnipeg winter weather for a while anyways. I'm, moving to Toronto in just a couple months. So
it's exciting.
Say that again?
You're coming down to our neck of the woods.
Yes. Yeah. I am going to, as far as the weather goes, I'll have, a nice summer, and then winter will be a little chilly, but not quite minus 40. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. But coming back.
The winters here will mean nothing to you. The winters here, if you've been living in Winnipeg your whole life, man, you'll just be.
Are you there?
Yeah. Sorry, we had a little clip there, but I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Enough about the weather talk. No one really cares. I say maybe a couple of people like the weather talk, but let's talk about MMA because that's what people are here for. A lot has actually gone on in the past week or so, which is crazy because I feel like. I mean, besides Daniel Cormier becoming the champ, which is obviously a crazy story, and International Fight Week as a whole, a lot happened. I feel like in the past few months in general, not much has happened. So it's kind of nice to have a few things going on and being able to talk about them besides just, who do you think is going to win this fight? What did we think of last week's card? I say that, but we will talk about last week's UFC Boise Fight Night card. It was headlined by Junior dos Santos versus Blagoy Ivanov, a pretty important heavyweight fight, in which JDS, the former UFC heavyweight champion, won 50-45 unanimous decision across the board. All three judges scored it that way. No one gave Ivanov even just a round. What did you make about this fight? I mean, I think, to me, there weren't too many surprises. I expected the Brazilian to win. I didn't know it would be by decision. I had a feeling it could go to the judges, which is kind of shocking in a heavyweight fight. Both guys hit pretty hard. I just had a feeling there's a chance. I ended up picking Dos Santos by late TKO, but going all 5 rounds didn't shock me. What did you make of it, and were you impressed by JDS's return?
So I wasn't too surprised that it went to the scorecards. I was impressed by his return. I'll probably echo what a lot of people are thinking, where he is kind of starting to show his age, or showing ring rust, if you believe in that sort of thing. It depends. Some people do, some people don't. It reminded me a little bit of the Ben Rothwell fight from a couple of years ago. Less impressive. The Ben Rothwell fight, I think, he was definitely more dominant, and it was also, he was facing a guy who was a little more well known. And I think Rothwell was on a bit of a kind of good stretch of success at the time. So when Dos Santos outworked him for 3 rounds, it was like super impressive. This one, I can understand if the enthusiasm is a little bit less. It's a guy that people don't really know. I think, your more casual fan would have expected Junior to walk through him, but given the long layoff and again, his age, and that Ivanov is definitely better than I think most people think, I don't think going 5 rounds was all that bad. So I was impressed. I wasn't, it didn't blow me away, Junior's latest performance.
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter that he won is impressive enough. I mean, as you said, ring rust, if you believe in it or not, doesn't really matter. I mean, the guy is coming off a long layoff, and his last fight was a brutal knockout loss to the then heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic. And so how do you recover from that? I know that's not the only time Dos Santos had been knocked out in his career. It's happened more than once, for sure. But, nonetheless, coming back against the former WSOF heavyweight champion, a lot of people, in general, are pretty high on Blagoy Ivanov. I know this was a tough debut for him. I'm sure he'll bounce back better than he looked in this fight. I still think it was a good win for Dos Santos. It gets him back in at least the picture at heavyweight. Maybe not, the title mix, maybe not one away from a title shot, but getting closer, considering heavyweight isn't exactly the best division in the UFC. So I think it's a good win for Dos Santos. I wasn't overly impressed. I thought Ivanov, could have done a little bit better, could have maybe taken the fight to the ground where he's known for. His sambo is, of course, very good. I think, the striking is sort of what I expected from Ivanov. He gassed out pretty badly. I saw that coming, but, just little things from Ivanov, I think, could have used a bit of work, and maybe he would have had a bit more success against the former champion Cigano. Where do we see JDS going from here? I mean, again, the heavyweight division isn't exactly good. He's like number 7, number 8 now in the division. Could be even higher if I'm for what I'm concerned. What do you think is next for JDS? It's kind of a wide open division right now, with Derek Lewis beating Ngannou, with DC as the champion. It's tough to say what the title picture is, because it's going to be DC Lesnar. But beyond that, we don't really know, how far away Lewis is from a title shot, or can Ngannou bounce back? Where do we see Dos Santos fitting in the title picture?
I was going to say, you mentioned Lewis. I think that's one name I saw popping out a lot. Technically he is also coming off a win, though I think we're all not exactly wanting to remember the Ngannou fight with any sort of fondness. But he is in the winner's lane, if you want to look at things in those terms. So the Lewis fight makes a lot of sense. Maybe Curtis Blades, though I wonder if Blades is interested in that. He seems pretty staunchly feels that he's done enough to just get a title shot as it is. But I think we all know that doesn't look like it's going to happen in the next 6 months or so,
unless he waits for DC Lesnar. But
I guess he could wait. But I don't think for a guy like Blades, I think it behooves him to fight again, which is unfortunate, because a heavyweight loss can come to anyone. But he might have to. And I don't know if it was Stipe or someone, but someone also mentioned, why not Stipe and JDS run it back? They're 1-1. Do a rubber match. I know some people don't like those, especially since it doesn't seem like it would have any immediate title implications, but I think both their fights were good. So I don't, for me, just as a fight fan, I would definitely like to see Dos Santos and Stipe fight again. But Stipe, I have a feeling, probably doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, as you said, there's a lot of options. If they want to throw him in there against Curtis Blades, who at this point in time, I think would probably run all over JDS. I don't particularly want to see that. I don't have tons of intrigue in that fight or interest in that fight, but maybe even a fight with Derek Lewis, who I think JDS could be competitive with the Black Beast, or even if they want to rebook the Ngannou fight, if Ngannou's ego is gone, according to Dana White, and everything is okay there, then maybe that would be a fun one. Maybe JDS would have a chance if Ngannou is tentative, or maybe Ngannou would just steamroll him. I don't really know, but there's a lot of options for JDS. I don't want to again, I think Ngannou, if he looked better against Lewis, I'd be saying avoid, keep JDS away from Ngannou. There's no point, no need to give JDS that unnecessary damage. But now I'm not so sure if Ngannou would just blitz him in the first round. Maybe he would, but after seeing his last 2 fights, I don't know. Same thing with Lewis. I think JDS could be competitive against him, as I said. So a lot of options. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I don't think JDS is in a terrible spot. Even if they want to run back the Verdum rematch from way back when, years ago, Verdum's coming off a loss, JDS off a win. Doesn't make the most sense in the world, but they could do it. Maybe throw him in there against Overeem again. I mean, there's a lot of options. There's nothing that makes a tons of sense, I don't think. Nothing that stands out among the rest, but there's a lot of fights that could work, and I don't think many people would complain about. So,
I think it's just good to have Dos Santos back in the mix. I think having him back in the mix makes the UFC's heavyweight division a more interesting place, and that's nothing but a good thing.
The co-main event of UFC Boise, Super Sage Northcutt gets back on track, gets his first welterweight win in the promotion. He defeats Zach Otto via, what was it, second round TKO, I believe it was. Impressive performance. I mean, I picked the underdog, the slight underdog in Zach Otto here. I just thought he'd be a bit bigger, tougher, and would be able to wrestle Northcutt a little bit and would have some success on the feet as well. But Northcutt's youth, his age, and obviously the guy is really strong, and he's a good fighter. I mean, all the crap Sage Northcutt gets, he's a pretty talented fighter, and at 22, he's just getting better. I was thoroughly impressed with Sage Northcutt.
Yeah, for sure. I had also picked Otto just because I wasn't convinced that Sage Northcutt could necessarily be an effective welterweight. He was undefeated at lightweight, but he had no wins in 2 attempts in the UFC at welterweight. So I thought I wasn't even sure why this match was made. Zach Otto is tough, but matchmakers knew what they were doing, because it did. We were talking about how talented Sage looks. He got to show toughness. He got hit hard right in the first 30 seconds of the fight. When they showed the replay, he got hit. I think it was hit by a right cross or something. His eyes rolled back in his head. He was definitely out of it momentarily, and then it went to the mat and he had time to recover. And going to the mat with Otto is another thing, and surviving there, because Otto's a very strong grappler. Northcutt has been criticized a lot for his submission losses. So he got to show, him getting rocked and him having to go to the mat with Otto and then coming back and triumphing in the second round is probably the best thing that could have happened to him. I like Sage Northcutt as a prospect. I think people's perceptions got skewed, not just by themselves, but by the UFC for pushing him so hard. But you're right. What we're seeing here is a kid who I think has just turned 22 years old recently. And we're getting to see the part of a prospect development that you don't normally see. That normally happens before fighters get to the UFC. And I don't think people get that. I think people think, oh, well, why isn't this guy killing it right away? And it's most fighters when they're 22 are on the regional scene picking up first round KOs and first round submissions over nobodies. So he's being put through a really tough process. Is it going to make him into a star? We don't know. Could stunt his growth, but I think it's very cool that we get to watch, and maybe this will inform how the UFC develops prospects like him in the future.
And I think it goes to show you that you don't have to be undefeated to be a future champion. You can go through hardship early on in your career. You can lose 2 in a row. I can't remember if Northcutt actually did lose 2 in a row, but the 2 welterweight losses, of course, stand out. Bryan Barberena, Mickey Gall, both, submission losses in 2016 and I think 2017, maybe actually both 2016. But, I think after, say, getting or getting choked out by Mickey Gall, people are saying, okay, we were hyping up Sage Northcutt way too much, and he'll never go anywhere, and he'll just be sort of, a little below top 15. He'll be a contender maybe, but nothing really more than just an action fighter at 155 and maybe 170. But, training full-time at Team Alpha Male, I think has done pretty good things for him. I don't know if we've seen the growth I would have expected. I think he's gotten better, though, and I think that'll keep on, or he'll keep on getting better. He'll keep on improving. So I think that move is great for him, especially long-term. And so it's really interesting, because I do think Sage Northcutt can still be a top 5 guy, just not right now. Maybe in 3 years, maybe in 2 years, maybe down the road. And so let him come into his prime a little bit more or get closer, because he's still super far away from his physical prime as far as MMA goes. And so I still think there's time. We got to give him time. That's the key here. Don't expect a UFC champion at the age of 22, but give him time, and maybe we will see it. So I think it's interesting, because if you asked me 2 years ago, is Sage Northcutt a future champion right after losing to Barberena, I would have said no. But now, it's still tough to say, but I think he can be a top guy down the road. So I'm interested to see where Sage Northcutt goes from here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly no reason to bet against him. Again, I just think, we're very much the fact that he's on this platform and people get to see his losses means he's going to get picked apart more than other people. And that's what comes, that's the gift and the curse, because he's certainly much better compensated than a lot of fighters were when they were 22. I'm sure if you ask anyone like an Anderson Silva or anyone, who we consider a Demetrius Johnson, who like great champions, how much were they getting paid when they were 22? If they saw like compared to Northcutt's paychecks, holy crap, they'd be like, I'll take that pressure any day. But yeah, it's again, look at those guys, go back to their age 22 years, see what they were doing, see what kind of losses they had, and imagine writing off like a Demetrius Johnson, or writing off, if he lost when he lost to Brad Pickett, Demetrius Johnson lost to Brad Pickett all these years ago, and people saying, that guy will never be a future champion. Like, how silly is that, right? So I understand the scrutiny of Sage. I think he's both very easy to like and very easy to dislike, as is anyone that gets put in the spotlight like this. But for me, I'll say I'm definitely, as you said, intrigued. Mostly intrigued, and this win was a very big step for him.
One last fight I want to talk about for this Boise card before we move on to things, other things going on in future cards. Chad Money Mendes. He gets the win over Miles Jury. First round KO, I guess TKO. Ground and pound shots followed up from a big, overright. I think right it was on the feet. Chad Mendes looked very good, and it looked like he wasted no time, during his 2-year suspension from USADA. I know he did a lot of hunting. I know he got his hunting company. I forget the name of it, but it's really taken off from the looks of it, just looking at his social media and all that. But it looked like he didn't really skip a beat. It looked like he fought maybe 2 months ago. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Last fight was the knockout loss to Frankie Edgar way back in December 2015. But Chad Mendes looked good. He looked like a featherweight contender. And, what did you make of it? I mean, were you surprised by how quick it all ended? I mean, Chad Mendes hits hard. We know that, but there was no ring rust whatsoever.
Right. We talked about ring rust with JDS and like, it must be real. And then you watch Chad Mendes, you're like, well, clearly it doesn't exist. So that's why people make that argument. But I mean, look at this guy's prior to the suspension, he had lost 3 of his last 4 fights. But look who he lost to: Frankie Edgar, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo. It's 3 of the best featherweight fighters of all time. I mean, so for people to think that like, Mendes would be either just say, maybe he doesn't belong among the contenders, and now that he's back, he's not going to get back in. That was crazy. So I said 3 and 4. The one win in there was a first round TKO of Ricardo Lamas, who was insanely tough and a perennial top 10 guy. So no, it didn't surprise me too much. I definitely picked Mendes to win. Would I have seen a first round KO coming? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think Jury's a very solid guy, but I definitely would not put him in the tier of Mendes and the guys who have beaten Mendes. So definitely impressed by Mendes' performance. I know he's back in the UFC rankings already, and really that's where he belongs. Now that he's paid his debt to the USADA and won another fight.
And one last thing on Mendes, as far as where he stands, I mean, how far away from a title shot is he? And as far as what we think, can he still contend against the Cub Swansons, the Frankie Edgars, the Brian Ortegas, the Max Holloways of the world?
Yeah, he's 1 win away. I honestly think he's 1 win away. It depends who it is. It depends who the timing is. It depends the health of the champion Max Holloway. If they create some sort of interim situation. It's funny asking anything like how close is someone to a title shot these days is almost just like flipping a coin or rolling a die. It's like, I don't know. It really depends. So many things are outside of just winning and losing in the cage now. So I think he's very close. I think you could see him get another top 5 opponent, win that, and then wherever the cards may fall, either get a title shot at whoever the champion happens to be 6-7 months from now, or interim opportunity.
All right, let's move on and talk about Stipe Miocic. He wants the title shot. He wants the immediate rematch against his UFC 226 foe earlier this month, Daniel DC Cormier, who knocked out Stipe in the first round. Of course, everyone knows that by now. To become the champ, become the light heavyweight champion and the heavyweight champion. Stipe was not happy with Brock Lesnar entering the cage after that fight. Pushing DC and that whole fight being set up. He is not happy whatsoever. He talked to Ariel Helwani of ESPN on, last week or early this week, I guess, on his podcast, talking about, he's only going to take a rematch. That's the only fight he wants. He deserves it. He broke the heavyweight title defense record in the UFC. He, of course, considers himself the greatest heavyweight of all time, and he thinks everything DC Lesnar is ridiculous. Now, considering Stipe Miocic, months before the DC fight, said he would be willing to fight Brock Lesnar after the fight, is this just him? I guess, what do you make of this? Is it fair for Stipe to be saying this after the fact? In hindsight, of course, hindsight is 2020. He knows now that he lost to DC. He knows that he's not going to be fighting Brock Lesnar next for the heavyweight title. He's no longer the champion. Now he's just trying to get back to the top as fast as he can. Is what Stipe is saying fair, in your opinion?
I think, I can't remember who tweeted about this immediately, maybe like immediately after it all went down, was we need to eliminate words like fair and deserves from our vocabulary when we're talking about it's a horrible thing to say, but when we're talking about the not just, I don't want to say MMA in general, definitely at the highest level at the UFC, even Bellator with their matchmaking sometimes it's not about fair or deserve. It's not about who's winning the most fights. So is he right to complain? 100%. If we're using just the most basic logic, he defended the title several times. Other fighters have gotten rematches with less credibility and less prominent runs than Stipe. So it's totally fair. But at the same time, he knows the business. He's made comments to that as well. He's aware of why they're making the Brock the DC rematch. We all are, not rematch, sorry, match. We all are. There's certainly money to be made in it. How much remains to be seen. But my money would be betting that I think he will. I know he's taking a hard stance now. Let him enjoy, I know he just had another kid. Let him enjoy that, ruminating on that for a bit. Take a little break, rest up, recover. I bet you he will accept a non-rematch at some point before the end of the year.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd probably end up sort of going with that as well. Do you know? Did Stipe's wife have her baby?
I don't know. I believe she was due. She was supposed to be due.
I thought she was due like right after the fight, but I haven't seen any pictures or anything. So
I don't know.
Late baby, perhaps. So you never know. But yeah, I mean, I think right now it's just Stipe. I mean, I think it's fair that he can be upset. I think I understand why he's upset. I think we all do. I think it's okay to be upset in this point. I mean, he did have the heavyweight title defense record. He still has it. No one's broken that, and I don't think Daniel Cormier will, considering he's going to be retiring next March. But Stipe is always going to go down as one of the greatest heavyweights in the UFC. Maybe not the greatest, but right up there, top 3, top 5 for sure. But does he deserve an immediate rematch? I mean, it's tough to say. If we're trying to look at this, realistically, and I mean, even if Brock Lesnar didn't exist, if that thing wasn't happening, does Stipe get an immediate rematch? I don't know, maybe. But Daniel Cormier, I guess it's really tough to say because DC doesn't want, he only wants big fights. He's not going to be fighting the Alexander Volkovs and Curtis Blades of the world either. And so maybe the rematch would happen because DC, one of the fights he is willing to take before retirement is the Miocic rematch. So it is tough to say. I can see where Stipe is coming from, but I think once he sort of realizes that, hey, whatever I say isn't going to affect anything. Dana White and the UFC does what Dana White and the UFC wants. Brock Lesnar does what Brock Lesnar wants. And at this point in time, Daniel Cormier does what DC wants too. And so I'm not getting this immediate title rematch unless I just sit out, and I don't really want to do that. So let's go fight, I don't know, Junior dos Santos a third time, or let's go fight, whoever, Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, someone. And so I think, he's certainly one win away from another title shot. He was looking good in that DC fight early on, and so before he got clipped with the right hand. And so, yeah, I say one win away, but immediate rematch, not a fan of them usually anyways. And so unless you're a super dominant champion like Ronda Rousey, maybe Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I was okay with Joanna versus Rose too. But this one, I don't know. I mean, I'm on board with the Brock Lesnar fight. As silly as it, some people might think it is, I'm on board. I'm okay with it, even though I probably shouldn't be, because this is sport, but I've realized this really isn't sport. So Lesnar, DC, sign me up. Sorry, Stipe. I feel bad for you in a way, but it's time to get in line. Okay, let's move on.
I'm sure Jed has told you how much he hates immediate rematches. Jed is a believer in just win one fight in between, just win one, anyone, like in boxing, give him a tune-up fight in between and then do the rematch. And I actually, for the most part, support that idea, except in situations like you said, like Joanna didn't have a problem with that. But I do like if you lose, win one, and then you're right back in. You're right back in.
Yeah, because it lets it build up more. I mean, I think Holloway, now this is sort of going off a little bit, but I think Holloway Ortega is a fight or is a pairing of two fighters that could be a trilogy. I think in 3 years from now, there's a good chance Holloway and Ortega have fought 3 times, maybe 2, but perhaps they do it 3 times. And so do I want to see those back to back to back? No, not really. Let's let it build up a little bit. Maybe Ortega upsets Holloway in the first fight whenever it does happen, if assuming Holloway gets healthy, fingers crossed, obviously. So say that happens later this year, at the end of the year, early next year, whenever. Ortega upsets him. I don't care to see it right away. I don't want to see them do it again, 3 months later. Let Ortega maybe defend the title once or twice. Let Holloway get on a bit of a winning streak and make it even bigger. Make the rematch bigger than the first fight. And then say Holloway wins again. Then build it up even more. And so by the third fight, it can be maybe the biggest fight, not quite of all time, but it can be way bigger than if they just did it back to back to back. And so I know we're not really talking about immediate rematches, but now we are. And I think this is why you don't want to do them all that often.
It just rarely pays off. I'm just trying to think of situations where it's worked out for the promotion, and I'm sure when anyone watching, there's at least a few that'll come to mind. But just for me, it's a struggle. When I think of great trilogies, I think of like I'm GSP Matt Hughes, which stretched out over a very long period of time.
I think you covered your microphone. Something happened. There we go. We're good.
Yeah.
If you just put your hand down or something, then maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I definitely need to get an external. But I was just saying, I don't know any great trilogies that are based on the fights in MMA. Maybe in boxing, but in MMA, any great trilogy that happens just the 3 fights, bang, 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 or the 2 fights, bang, bang, like they stretch out. You stretch them out over at least a 2-year period, and then you end up with something great. But that's not really the strategy of the UFC these days.
Cris Cyborg, the UFC Women's Featherweight Champion, is not exactly happy right now. And not happy with the UFC, with probably Dana White, because it seems like that's the case always anyways. And certainly not happy with Women's Bantamweight Champion Amanda Nunes. So they are going to fight. It seems like that is not quite a done deal. But as far as Nunes versus Cyborg being the next title fight in both weight classes, that seems to be what's going to happen next. Now, when it'll happen, we don't really know yet. Cyborg wants to fight in September. She wants to fight earlier than Nunes does. She wants to fight at UFC 228 in Dallas. Nunes wants it to happen later on I believe she wants the year-end show, December 29th in Vegas, UFC 230. I want to say 232, 231. I think 232, but she wants it a couple months later. She wants it 3 months later because she has a foot injury. She's healing from that, and over the past week or so, they've sort of just been going back and forth. I know they haven't, not too many updates over the past few days, but I know last week they were going back and forth a little bit. And Nunes says she's agreed to the fight for December 29th. Cyborg says she's agreed to it for September. Nunes, sends out a photo of a bout agreement that Cyborg has not agreed to. And it's kind of just a mess. But what we do know, or at least we think we know, is that UFC did offer both of them the fight for December 29th. Nunes agreed, of course, as I said, but Cyborg is trying her hardest to, get Nunes to fight earlier and get the UFC to I guess, offer the fight for them for that Dallas card. Sort of, kind of a weird situation because the fight's probably happening, but you might not. If they can't agree to it, if they can't, agree to a date, maybe it just falls apart entirely.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. There is a good chance this fight just never happens. It's not as won't be as painful or as prolonged as the Cyborg Rousey courtship, which seemed to, I swear, lasted like 10 years. But it's unfortunate that it did seem like both of them were kind of interested in it recently, and then still are, and certainly still are interested in it, but cannot agree on conditions and when, and that's that's part of the gamesmanship of before they even fight. You don't want to concede anything to your opponent. That's like the first step. It's like I gave up the date. I'm behind. I'm behind in the mental game. How much that really matters, I don't know. But I think to these fighters, it does matter. I think to their management, it does matter. I really want to see this fight. I don't think that's an extreme opinion. I think a lot of people would. I do think Nunes presents a reasonable challenge. I see some people saying that Cyborg might walk through her. I don't think so. I think Holm was a reasonable challenge. Even if you think that Cyborg definitively won that fight, at least, you know, Holm made it 5 rounds. That's certainly something to crow about. So we really, you know, if this featherweight division is to ever mean anything, it would be nice to see that fight happen. But certainly it is by no means guaranteed to ever occur. It could just be we get Cyborg, you know, they dig up one last featherweight for her last contracted fight, and then on to Bellator.
It's a tough fight or tough situation to be in, I guess, and it's really tough to say. I mean, does Cyborg Nunes ever happen? I mean, I hope so. That seems to be the fight to make. A lot of people love it. I'm not opposed to Nunes defending once more at bantamweight and Cyborg. I know, I mean, there's really no one for her to fight, but so I guess you kind of have to do this fight by now. But yeah, I mean, it's no one can say it's not a great fight. No one can say Nunes doesn't pose any sort of challenge to Cyborg. She certainly does. Now, I'm not saying she would win. I'd probably pick Cyborg. Of course, I mean, the fight's still months away if it does happen, so I could change my pick. But right now, Cyborg would have to be favored as far as I'm concerned. But if you want to pick Nunes, I mean, I think go for it. And so it's unfortunate if it doesn't happen. And I really hope they can just, I mean, Cyborg, I get her frustration. I totally understand it. She's in the prime of her career, she says, and she just doesn't want to be wasting time. And she hasn't fought since March. I know that's not the longest layoff in the world, but if a UFC champion wants to stay active, I think the promoter just has to be fortunate for that. I mean, you have champions. Dana White complains that fighters are, nowadays just try and pick fights and sit out for long periods of time and fight once a year. He says, back in the good days, they'd fight 3 times a year, 4 times a year, make no money and be fortunate and be all that. And so here we are with a champion that wants to fight and she can't get fights. And it's unfortunate that she's the champion of a division that barely exists in the UFC. So that sucks. But yeah, I guess it's no one's fault per se. Nunes is not totally healthy. She wants more time to heal up from her last fight against Pennington, so I can't blame her. I can't blame Cyborg, and obviously I can't really blame the UFC for struggling to find other opponents for Cyborg. I mean, I wouldn't really have much success in that area either. So it's just a situation that sucks for us, I guess, the people that covering the sport and the fans, but no one is really to blame here. We just sort of have to wait and see. But Cyborg, if this keeps up, if she stays frustrated, she says, I mean, this might be the last fight in the UFC or my last fight in the UFC. What do you think about that? I mean, you mentioned Bellator real brief. Do you think that's a legitimate statement? Do you think there's some sort of legs on that? Do you think that's a possibility that Cyborg fights Nunes and, as you said, goes off somewhere else?
Yeah. I think whatever, it wouldn't surprise me, regardless of who she fights next, that is the last time we see her fight in the UFC, at least for the time being. She has a good relationship with Scott Coker. Bellator it just seems more suited to what she's trying to do, and they do at least have, again, it's not like a booming featherweight division, but they have a featherweight division. It's not super deep, but they have at least two or three women that are legitimate. A legitimate 145ers, which don't even exist in the UFC, and also are decent fighters, good opponents, a good name she could have in her resume. I mean, we all want to see, anyone who keeps up with Bellator wants to see her fight the Bellator featherweight champion Julia Budd. Julia Budd is physically, I think, unlike any opponent Cyborg has ever had. She's a super athlete and really constantly improving as a fighter. Like, she's been around for quite a few years, but she's fought nothing but high level competition and is getting into that phase now where she's starting to really blow out. Or at least in her last fight, she blew out an opponent who was considered to be decent and really just dominated her. And that's good. And that means that she's, I don't want to say ready to be competitive with Cyborg, but at least I think it's a fight people would want to see. Especially, again, and if anyone's not familiar with Julia Budd, just look up any highlights of her or just take a look at her physique. People are always saying, well, Cyborg only beats up smaller fighters. That would not be an issue with Julia Budd. If Cyborg beat her up, it would not be just because of size, because Julia Budd, again, great athlete, very, very, very strong woman. So that's the fight to make. So maybe I'm just projecting, wanting to see Cyborg in Bellator, but I think it'd be good for her. How the money works out, no clue. Again, I don't know the details of her UFC contract. I wouldn't pretend to know what a Bellator contract might entail. But if she really is looking for competition and just to keep building her legacy, a Bellator move would be really good.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think maybe a move to boxing would be likely as well. I don't know if I ever see Cris Cyborg in Bellator. It would make sense because they arguably have a better featherweight division than the UFC with Julia Budd as a champion, but as you talked about. But something about that. I mean, I don't get the feeling as if that's a real possibility. I mean, it is, but I guess I don't get the feeling that will happen. I think she might. I don't really know. I mean, ultimately, I think she'll stay in the UFC. I think she realizes. I mean, she's a smart person from what I know about her, and so just she knows that, hey, even though maybe the opponent level and the actual amount of opponents I want aren't here, but the money's here, the recognition is here, and ultimately I think she'll stay with the UFC for a little bit longer. I don't totally buy the whole fight Nunes and walk away, go to Ryzen. I mean, I would love to see Cris Cyborg and Ryzen.
Yes,
I think that'd be fantastic. But I would stay up till 6 a.m. to watch Cris Cyborg beat up somebody in Ryzen. I really would. But will that happen? Probably not. Although she does have Gabby Garcia. She's friends with Garcia, so maybe Gabby can hook them up. Maybe Gabby can, introduce Cris with Sakaki Bara and all of the Ryzen people, and maybe they can make that happen. I would like that.
She'd be an enormous star in Japan, for sure.
She would be, and she'd make a lot of money because she'd be the face of Ryzen, if we're being honest. Yep. I mean, besides Kyoji Horiguchi, who, because he's Japanese, is basically the face of Ryzen. I mean, as a Brazilian, she would be definitely the face of Ryzen, and that would be fantastic. But will that happen? Probably not. All right, let's move on. And one last topic to discuss before we talk about briefly UFC Hamburg, which comes up on Sunday afternoon, depending where you are in this world. The feud I never really wanted to talk about or wanted to have to follow or wanted to even happen, but here it is. Dana White versus Brendan Schaub. They've been going back and forth a lot. I don't really want to explain the specifics. We all know what is going on. It's, I learned what an Eskimo brother is last week. I didn't know what that was until...
How did you not know?
What's that?
How did you not know?
I think there's more people than you think who didn't know.
There's a lot of people who didn't know. I was. It made me wonder, why do I know? I remember when I was like, because I read it and I didn't. When I saw the term come, I didn't flinch. I was like, that's my brothers. Oh, that's cute. And then I was seeing a lot of the reaction online. I was just like, what's an Eskimo brother? What does that mean? I'm like, why do I know what that means? And I think I think the age group that used that phrase is not as wide as I thought it was. I think it's like a very small. It's like a span of maybe 5 or 6 years where that was kind of a hot term, or I don't know, or maybe yeah.
And it's definitely not common now. I mean, I guess if we want to go way out there and talk about, Eskimo is not PC, right? So I don't know. I guess we don't use it now, but Brendan Schaub.
It's a ridiculous phrase. I think that we can agree on. I think it's
Brendan Schaub disagrees with you. He likes the phrase. He called he talked about Dana White as his Eskimo brother, and who they're talking about, we don't know. You can only speculate. What do you think about all this? I mean, it's stupid. It's insane. It's barely worth our time, but it probably drives the click, so we probably should talk about it. If we're just being honest about it, what do you make of this circus?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's easy for us to say nobody cares, but you're like me. We're both in the same business, and we have some idea of the traffic that these stories bring in. So if nobody cares about this story, then that must mean like even less people care about everything else we wrote, because this was doing some of the best numbers of the week, from what I could see. So maybe it's just because people like a good, a mud fight, and yeah, obviously you're right. It has no real consequences on the business. It's a battle between two personalities who I know. It's not everyone's favorite people. I'm not going to say either way, but for sure, it's a very strange argument. And the funny thing is, like, at the heart of it, if you want to strip away all the BS, you could find positives in both sides. Like, as I always want to do, I'll always find positive things. Dana was, in his Dana way, protecting criticism, blocking criticism of a very prized prospect because he thought that Schaub was criticizing Israel Adesanya, who I think we all agree is one of the most exciting young fighters in the UFC today. And if that was correct, if Schaub was, saying his kickboxing credentials didn't mean he'd be a good fighter, and yeah, that's a bit off base, and I can understand Dana White wanting to argue that. I don't know how he heard about it or why he went out of his way to reply, but
so it all started in Adesanya's Instagram.
Yeah, exactly, not on either Schaub or Dana's. And then Schaub, the other day, he got to elaborate more this week on his own show, saying like, "Oh well, it's not just that. It's also I don't like Dana." He kind of turned into this whole other issue about, oh, why did Dana criticize Ngannou the way he did, and he's a very negative person, and I don't like the way he addresses fighters when they're down. So he kind of changed the issue a little bit, and it's fine. And there's, again, he said things I'm sure a lot of fans would agree with about how Dana presents himself and how he dresses down his I don't want to say employees because they're not employees, his contracted fighters. So it's funny, at the heart there's certainly logic on both sides, but both guys just have a way of communicating that sometimes can be off-putting, I think, to fans, and certainly clearly off-putting to each other, that they don't seem to get along in that regard. But I wouldn't be surprised if 6 months from now, Schaub said this himself, they'll be chumming it up. One phone call, a text here or there, the next event, shaking hands, taking an Instagram photo together, whatever. You'll see it on Schaub saying, it's like, here I am with my Eskimo brother Dana White, LOL, something to that effect. So watch out for that. Yeah, get that post ready. We need those clicks. So I'm pre-writing it for MMA Fighting right now.
You're not even just pre-writing the MMAfighting.com report. You're pre-writing Schaub's Instagram post, yes, which probably is pretty accurate too. So yeah. You're one step ahead of everybody here, Alex. Yeah, I mean, what is kind of whatever to me. It's kind of just funny if we're being honest, but it's all at the same time, it's very, very ridiculous and doesn't really need to be happening. Yeah, and then you I guess to extend off of it, I mean, I think you sort of summed it up perfectly, but to extend to go, after Josh Thompson comes in here and says, I'm not going to name names, but, Dana White has been doing some things he probably shouldn't be doing, or at least in the past he has been, and with the Me Too movement going on, and, Dana White could be in some hot water if people speak up. So it's all speculation. I'm just saying what Josh Thompson said. He didn't say any names, so again, there's not much leg to what he's saying or what Schaub's saying or what Dana's saying, but I guess just keep your eyes peeled. Things might get weird. Is that a great way to put it? I don't know.
I mean, it's MMA. Yes, things can get weird. And Josh Thompson's always been an outspoken guy, so it doesn't surprise me at all. He'd want to get involved and want a little piece of that traffic, or that's the story. But again, like you said, it's hearsay. I don't like to dig into that stuff. If something substantial comes out, something substantial comes out. But certainly, you won't hear from me. Whatever rumors seem to be floating around, I'm sure. Again, you hear these things with all kinds of people in power, celebrities, and it's really definitely best not to dabble in it. So Josh Thompson, have at it, sir. You are, I understand he's a personality. He has a personality himself to sell, but I would not talk about that myself.
All right, let's move on to things I guess we can talk about, or things coming up. We have UFC Fight Night 134 on Sunday afternoon, UFC Hamburg in Germany. We got a light heavyweight fight in the main event, Shogun Rua, Mauricio Rua, the former champion, against short notice replacement Anthony Lionheart-Smith. Pretty interesting fight. I mean, I think Daniel Cormier saying he wants to fight Rua next has probably added some stakes to this. I know Anthony Smith isn't DC's biggest fan right now. He was upset with DC essentially overlooking Anthony Smith and just saying, I mean, totally disregarding that this fight is happening, which I don't exactly think was Cormier's intent, but he probably didn't even know that this fight was booked, if we're being honest. But so I think DC just going out of his way and saying he wants to fight Shogun next, or that's an option anyways, has probably added some conversation to this fight, made it a little bigger than it should be or would be, but I'm not complaining about that. At the end of the day, Shogun is the number 8th ranked light heavyweight, and so he does have some merit in this sport still, in the division for sure. And I think he's, if he beats Anthony Smith, he might be 1 or 2 wins away from a title shot, as crazy as it sounds, considering it is 2018 and not 2010. But He does have to get past Anthony Smith though, and Lionheart's a tough guy. His defense might not be the best in the world, but I mean his offense. I mean he's a good fighter. His striking is really good. He's a big fighter, and at light heavyweight, he has looked very good. I know it's only been one fight against a shell of himself, Rashad Evans, but I think he, not having to cut the extra 20 pounds has done very good things for Anthony Smith. It's made him maybe even a different fighter, and I think he has a good chance to beat the underdog here in Shogun Rua.
Yeah, I mean, having spoken to Anthony, it's like he's definitely one of those fighters who, upon moving up, reflected back on like what was I doing cutting down to whatever my previous weight class, in his case 185. What was I doing before? It was how did I even fight the next day? Like it seems insane. And certainly light heavyweight against an aged Rashad Evans, he looked very good, and I expect him to look good on Sunday as well. Now Shogun, it's funny. So this was courtesy of I was looking at our good friend, our good colleague Mike Vaughn from MMA Junkie. I'm always looking at his pre-fight facts, and one of them was Shogun is tied for the longest UFC light heavyweight win streak right now with the likes of Jan Blachowicz, Jordan Johnson, everyone's favorite Jordan Johnson, and Dominic Reyes. So that kind of shows you why it's not crazy to say, well, why not give Shogun the next title shot at Cormier, because he is on a win streak. And yes, that has to do with matchmaking. I can say win streak, and then you can look at the guys' resumes, who they beat, and then start doing a different kind of math from there. But Shogun is, from a name standpoint, is a much bigger name than the other three guys I just mentioned. He's certainly a much bigger name than Anthony Smith. And should he beat Lionheart on Sunday, I think people better get comfortable with the idea that before the Lesnar-Cormier fight, you could be seeing Cormier-Shogun. And on paper, that still sounds really cool to me, though, of course, I know it's not the sexiest matchup that you can make. But
no, I wouldn't consider it a competitive matchup, but Cormier is 39. He is the older fighter, so maybe age does play into this, and Shogun gets the upset. You never know. But we do have to, before even mentioning that, we have to talk about this fight. Do you think Shogun has a chance here, or is the pick about 2-1 favorite here in Anthony Smith?
Yeah, my pick is definitely Anthony Smith, but does Shogun have a chance? Of course he has a chance. Shogun, like you said, Anthony Smith, I like the guy a lot. His defense is questionable. He can be lured into a brawl, and that could be the detriment, or I should say the opposite. Anthony Smith could lure Shogun into a brawl. So I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's an exciting fight, fan-friendly. I wish they had more time to build this fight up properly, because I do think Smith, should he win, I think he does have potential. But no, the smart money is on Anthony Smith, which is understandable. Younger fighter. How much younger is he? I keep getting, it's funny when you mentioned Cormier.
I want to say Smith is 31. I could be totally wrong on that.
I just looked it up. 29. He's definitely younger. But it's funny that we feel like Shogun's been around so much longer than DC, and DC is older than him. I don't think it's out of the question at all for Shogun to win. He's still a very good striker. He still has. I don't think his chin is that bad. I know he suffered a few bad knockouts, but when you watch those, it kind of looks like he just got caught in them, just like anyone would. So I think his chin is good enough. I think we're going to see a knockout, though, and I think it'll be Anthony Smith who's going to be the one pulling it out. But not unreasonable to see Shogun.
It is a tough one to call, because Shogun with his kicks, he could lure Smith into a brawl, as you talked about. It could be the other way around, if we're being honest, but I think probably more likely Smith sort of gets a bit reckless, or more reckless than he would want to be or would like to be. I have to pick Lionheart, though. He's a younger guy. He's fresher. He's taken less damage. He probably has a better chin, although I don't think his chin is anything fantastic. Shogun, I don't know. I know you said it's probably not as bad as some people think, but I don't think he can take much of a shot. I mean, if Smith lands clean, Shogun probably goes down. I think there's an opportunity for this to be a pretty fun back and forth fight. I would never bet any substantial money on this, even though I can legally bet now as of like a week or so ago. I probably wouldn't. I mean, it's a really tough fight to call. And I think the odds are probably wider than they should be. I know I'm not a betting man, as I just said, but Smith at minus 225 or so, minus 220 I'm seeing right now. I mean, I'm not sure if that's giving Shogun the respect he deserves. He's a veteran. He's been the champ before, of course. He's been in there with the best of the best. He's obviously fought the better competition. He has the veteran experience. He has the veteran savvy. Can Smith deal with all that? And can Smith deal with the leg kicks? And who has been training for this fight? Smith is up on short notice. So given all that, I think Hua has a good chance to victory here. You know, there's definitely a path for him, but I have to go with Anthony Smith. I have to go with the guy who, if they do get into a brawl, I think it's probably going to be who has a better chin, who is a bit more active. Hua, I mean, he used to go in there and maul guys. Now he's taking a bit of a different approach. He stands back, relies a bit more on counter shots and all of that, and reading your opponent and reacting. But that Hua, I think Smith is probably a bit more active than him. I think he lands better shots. I think he ultimately knocks out Hua midway through the fight. I'll say third round, but nothing would shock me. I think we could see a fun fight. I think we could see a first-round knockout. If this goes to the judges, I'd be quite surprised. That'll be the one thing I'll say. If this goes 5 rounds, I'd be quite shocked.
Yeah, I think it's worth getting up on Sunday afternoon for certainly. And by the way, I should tell people, anyone who's kind of like, well, unless you have better things to do, obviously. But if you're staying in, look, you could do a lot worse than Sunday afternoon MMA. Like, I am really excited for this card. It's not the strongest card. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in a second. But just talking from a scheduling standpoint, I think it'll be over by like 4 p.m. or 4:30 Eastern time over here. So more of that, UFC and or whoever is distributing UFC cards in the near future. Please, I've got no problem with afternoons. Let's do the international afternoon cards. They're lovely.
Yeah, Sunday afternoon. I'm not going to complain. Yeah, I actually have a huge family reunion on Saturday, so I don't know if I'll be getting up right at 9:30 a.m. to catch Damien Stasiak versus Pingwan Liu, but hey, maybe I'll catch the last few fights and it'll all be okay. It's not the best card anyway, so I'm not going to complain too much if I miss some of the earlier prelims. But what else does stand out to you? Because I mean, you as the person, probably you're more excited for this card, it sounds, than I am. What stands out to you? I mean, the co-main event. I mean, the previous co-main event was awesome. Glover Teixeira versus Ilir Latifi. That was going to be amazing.
Yes.
Glover Teixeira versus Corey Anderson. That's like 2 notches down. I still a fine matchup. Nothing amazing. I guess give me your pick in that fight real quick, and anything else stands out to you.
It's a bummer because I feel like, I'm not saying he's on this level, but you could be getting a little bit of a repeat of Phil Davis, Grover. I think that's the plan. For Corey Anderson, you want to do a lot of takedowns. You want to do a lot of control. I'm sure he's working on his stand. I'm sure he's working on a bunch of things on his jiu-jitsu. But boy, Teixeira is a tough guy. You don't want to try to match him skill for skill. And there's very few people who have done it. So, especially on short notice, I sense unfortunately, a grinding performance and grinding win for Corey. I mean, nothing against him, just for the fans. I don't know if it'll be the most exciting fight. Otherwise, I say look out for, if you're not going to get up for Stasiak Liu, man, I think I kind of intrigued by, this is the Fight Pass headliner, if that's even a thing. Davey Grant, Manny Bermudez. Davey Grant was from the same Ultimate Fighter season as Chris Holdsworth. And they kind of both, Chris Holdsworth beat him in the final. And it kind of looked like both guys were going to go on to have good careers. Holdsworth, we know, suffered a concussion in training, mysterious concussion in training, has not fought since. And Grant suffered a bunch of injuries himself. So it's kind of a shame. It's kind of like a lost season of 2 guys who I thought would become good fighters at 135. On the prelims, Justin Ledette, watch for him dropping down to light heavyweight. He's undefeated, 3-0 at heavyweight. And anyone who's seen him knows he looks undersized. So now he's going back to his natural weight class. Emil Meek coming back, trying to bounce back from that Usman loss, which probably exposed a lot of weaknesses. But exciting fighter, great KO power. He's facing a guy who hasn't fought in something like over 2 years, Bartosz Fabinski. I'm sure, by the way, I'm sure anyone listening is just thrilled with these names that are coming at them now. Just like, Bartosz Fabinski, I gotta watch it now. No disrespect.
Well, I think it was RJ Clifford who tweeted out a big, long list of probably not quite half the fighters, but probably a solid 10 or 15. All these names that the average person probably can't pronounce. And he wrote, I wish Mike Goldberg was still around.
Yeah, sure.
I agree with you. I concur.
And the definite sleeper on the main card, Danny Roberts and David Zawada. I mean, Roberts, this guy comes out and bangs every time. I know it's cliche to say it, but I would consider him to be an action fighter. I think Zawada is going to be, he's making his UFC debut, wants to make a good impression, and getting a main card shot. I believe Zawada is also, I think he's going to be repping Germany. So, yeah, he's from Dusseldorf. So he'll be fired up. So there's fights to watch. There's fights to watch. I understand if you know, it doesn't seem like the most exciting card to a lot of people, and I don't mean to be a UFC shield guy, but for me, definitely you're not. I don't think if you have nothing better to do, you won't regret tuning into this one. I think it looks like a good one.
Yeah, and I sort of, to go off what you said, as far as the co-main event, I will disagree with you. I will pick Glover Teixeira to beat Corey Anderson. I've never been all that high on Corey Anderson. I think he definitely has a path to victory here. He might look it or make it look like the Phil Davis fight, but I think since then, I mean, that was way back in 2015. I think Teixeira has worked on his ground defense a little bit and worked on not getting taken down. I think he's going to pull off the victory here. I think he's a better striker. And even on the ground, I mean, when it comes to submissions, he might be a little more talented. So, especially with a full camp, give me Glover. It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts because obviously overtime, or as I like to call him still, Beast in 25-8, which is by far the better nickname. Let me put that on record. I think, you know, Anderson, of course, way taller than Latifi. Latifi very short for the division. So let's see how Glover deals with that. But should all go well, he's a veteran, so he should be able to game plan pretty easily or quickly, I guess, with the aid of his coaches and all that. So I think Glover will pull it off. I think he's the favorite here for a good reason. One fight that does stand out, you didn't mention, was Nasrat Haqparast versus Mark Jacasey. I think that this could be a pretty fun fight. You know, Mark Jacasey is on a 2-fight skid, so he came in 3 wins in a row, looking very good, looking like the next big thing at 155 pounds, then sort of slows down a little bit, loses a couple times. I think this will be his rebound fight. I think this will be the bounce back for the Bone Crusher. I think Haqparast can put up a fight. I don't think he's on the level of Jacasey, but I think he can hang in there with him. I think he's a tough guy. I think he can throw back and throw some leather Jacasey's way. So I think he can make it a fun fight, but I think this is I could be totally wrong, but I feel like this is not quite a setup fight for Jacasey, but a fight that, you know, he should win, and I think he'll do so in fairly impressive fashion. As you said, Emil Mech, I'm interested to see how he looks. I know he's been training a lot with Kamaru Usman at the Performance Institute, so I think he'll be a lot better. And against a guy who hasn't fought in a while, I expect Mech to pull off a pretty impressive victory. And otherwise, I think that's basically it for this card. Anything else we want to say, or are we good?
No, I think, again, like I said, you know, everyone enjoy a nice brisk Sunday afternoon. I always encourage people to get fresh air instead of staying in and watching TV. But there's certainly storylines going into this. This could be storylines going out, like you said, the added intrigue of the kind of Cormier, Shogun, Anthony Smith tension. It certainly makes the main event worth watching. Glover Teixeira, always entertaining. And yeah, and just some good international prospects here. I'm glad you actually mentioned Haqparast. He's only 22 years old, so you know, should he lose to Jacasey, and let's say the UFC cuts him, you know, 0-2. His other fight was against Marcin Held, so another guy's been around forever. So you know, maybe Haqparast puts on a good fight, doesn't win, gets cut, picks up some wins back in the international scene, and then we see him come back later. So yeah, if people are interested in international prospects, you could certainly do a lot worse than this card. And little Miss Fist plug, of course, I always encourage people, go check out, there's a lot of free MMA out there out on YouTube, and I know there's a lot to watch as it is, so you know, people don't want to watch more, but for sure, you know, you never know what's out there, and there's a lot of entertaining fights that are a click away. So I encourage you, be adventurous with your MMA watching and have an open mind.
All right. One last thing before we say goodbye to the people. Now, I didn't mention this to you before the show, so don't hang up, don't leave. Just hang in here for a couple of minutes. We have a segment called Gets It, Doesn't Get It, where I have a couple things where we're just going to, I mean, whether it's a promoter, whether it's the UFC, whether it's Dana White, whether it's a fighter, whether it's a fellow journalist. In this case, it's not, but maybe it could be one day. We basically just briefly talk about why they related to something that's happened over the past week or so, something, you know, a recent event, so to speak, why they get it or why they don't get it. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you need help, I'm here. Just ask questions if you need, but I think you'll be okay. First one is Bellator for booking their semifinal heavyweight Grand Prix tournament fights back-to-back. Instead of a month apart, we're going to have Mitrione Bader and then Fedor Chael the next night. It's not going to be, you know, October we'll have Mitrione Bader, then 2 months later and, you know, say, or I guess a month later in November, we'll finally get this fight and we'll forget it's a tournament. I think Bellator is finally listening that if you're going to do a tournament and you're going to have, you know, separate semifinal fights and all this, put them as close together as possible. On the same night would even be better. But back-to-back, I think it's way better than month apart, and I think Bellator 100% gets it for this. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, they're definitely getting it. Like you said, a lot of fans are probably wishing that they had got it a while ago. So, again, you can dispute whether they got it or they're just, the booking worked out for them now. And I certainly wasn't someone that was complaining as much about it being stretched out, though it does somewhat defeat the purpose of even calling it a tournament if it's just going to be over such a long period of time. I was very
down a little bit.
Yeah, and I was very surprised that at least the first round, try and get those done within, again, if not on one show, which would have been amazing, at least within like 3 months, shows that are maybe 3 months apart tops. And even then, I know some people would think that's too long. So having stretched it out as long as they have, yeah, I understand the lack of patience. And, but yes, they are getting it, better late than never. I agree on that.
Next one is everything that has gone on with this Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley, Darren Till UFC fiasco. It sounds like the UFC is looking to strip Colby Covington of the interim welterweight title for being injured and not being able to fight Tyron Woodley, the no longer undisputed but still current welterweight champion, in September in Dallas. That's, I guess, what they wanted. Colby cannot fight. He is still recovering from the recent Rafael dos Anjos fight last month. In his place might come number 2 welterweight Darren Till. He is looking at fighting Tyron, I guess, in his spot, in Colby's spot. This is all crazy. It is all weird and probably shouldn't be happening. So basically, does the UFC get it or not get it for potentially stripping Colby Covington of the title this soon after winning it?
I'm only going to say it because I think I know what you're going to say, and I want to just play devil's advocate. I'm going to say that they got it. You know what? These interim titles, for one thing, are, gosh, I mean, I'll say they got it because should there have even been an interim title on the line in the first place? And nothing against Colby. I don't care who won it. Even if Rafael dos Anjos won it, I would have said, why are we giving these guys interim titles? I know we want 5-round fights, because I think it wasn't the main event. So I know they wanted to have a 5-round fight. I understand that. I know they're somewhat frustrated with Tyron Woodley, I'm sure. This is a power play. A lot of these things are little teeny tiny power plays, that the UFC uses to keep control of things. So, you know what? I say strip away. That's one less interim belt in play, or again, it'll probably be brought back in play when 2 months from now when they match up. I don't know, Emil Mech from tonight and someone else. Who knows? So. Usman rematch, right? That's what people would love, that for our interim title. So, you said they're training together now. Anyway, I've already gone down this well too deeply, but yeah, I'll just say, yeah, you know what? They got it. Take the belt away. Come on, Colby. You haven't fought in like 30 days, 40 days. What's the problem? Get back in there. Come on, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you, Alex, here. Give me doesn't get it for this one, for the UFC, for stripping Colby. Potentially, it still hasn't happened, and I'm sure, UFC says they're going to strip Colby, so I'm sure they won't after all, but say they do, Big doesn't get it. I know no one really wanted Colby Covington to win the interim title in the first place. I know a lot of people were upset. A lot of people, as in the fans, of course, were greatly disappointed by Covington's victory over Dos Anjos, but I don't think stripping him of the title. Now, as you said, should they have given him an interim title in the first place? Should they have made that interim title fight between Dos Anjos and Covington? No, they shouldn't have. But taking it away after giving it to him doesn't fix the problem, I don't think. Because then you have Darren Till, who missed weight in his last fight, barely beat Wonderboy, in my opinion, didn't beat Wonderboy, and now getting the next title shot when Covington has been hurt for a month. He fought a month ago, and he's already getting backlash from the UFC for not being able to fight in 2 months from now. This is insane to me. UFC, you so rarely get it nowadays. This is just another example. I'm sorry, but you guys don't get it here whatsoever. Colby Covington, I can't believe it, but, I'm saying you should be the UFC champion right now. Last one, Santiago Ponzinibbio last night in an Instagram post called out Rafael dos Anjos. Speaking of which, RDA is getting called out yet again by Ponzinibbio for the upcoming UFC Argentina card in Buenos Aires on November 17th. This, to me, was a great call-out. I love the fight. I think it makes sense. I know it's winner versus loser. Doesn't, I guess, make sense in that regard, but matchup matchup wise, it's a lot of fun, and I think rankings wise, it makes sense. Does Ponzinibbio get it for this call out? I would assume we're both going to be going gets it here.
No, you know what? I'm actually going to object more organically this time. Not like last time where I had to momentarily shut my brain off to make the argument. No, I actually think he doesn't get it. It's a good call out as far as reputation wise. I just think it's a fight he could. It's a very tough opponent. And I know that's what people want. I mean, I'm not blaming him. That's a good thing. You know, he's a rising contender. He should be calling out tough guys. But when you're doing what was it? When you're doing a hometown show, I would rather see him showcase against a less difficult opponent. I think there's a very good chance that RDA beats him and beats him badly. And I think Ponzinibbio is a really good fighter, but I also think like RDA is right up there, you know, which is why I would give credit to Covington for that win. I thought he fought a great 5-round fight. So credit to Covington. RDA is still right up there, like world championship level. I don't think Ponzinibbio is quite there yet. So I'm going to say he doesn't get it because I think he should be, I don't want to say chasing a can or something, but just maybe a slightly lower tier opponent. He so far he's shown he's a classic fighter's fighter. I don't think I've ever seen him try and call out someone like lower, or he's always calling out tough guys. So, but just this one time, I would like to see him take a step back, just find something that he knows he can knock the F out or dominate for 5 rounds in front of his hometown. And so, yeah, I understand the reasoning behind it, but I'm going to say, no, Ponzi, you don't get it. You got to be careful. You're going to get your butt kicked by RDA. Watch out.
Interesting. I'll go the other way, and I think Ponzinibbio gets it here. I actually think it's a winnable fight for him. I'm not sure I would pick him. I think, you know, as you said, RDA is a very good fighter, and welterweight has definitely done very good things for him. Covington sort of derailed his hype train, so to speak, but or not hype train, but just success. But nonetheless, RDA is a very tough opponent. So I give props to Ponzinibbio for, you know, as you said, not calling out a guy he can just smash in front of his hometown fans and all that. So I guess as a fighter's fighter, I think Ponzinibbio gets it. Maybe as, you know, as a fighter, maybe. I mean, you can look at this 2 ways. Should a fighter look for the easiest matchups possible that remain realistic? Maybe. Should they go out and be brave and call out tough guys? Maybe. Is that what Ponzinibbio is doing? So it's just, you know, it's sort of in life. It's like, do you get it for trying to get the easy path, easy way out of everything, every situation? Not necessarily. So I don't know. I think Ponzinibbio gets it here. He might lose, but I'm sure he can learn some lessons in defeat too. So I don't see a problem with the matchup. Rankings wise, it makes sense. And hey, Ponzinibbio RDA 5 rounds. I mean, I can't think of a better fight right now at 170. Now, maybe I'm just, you know, in awe of this matchup that I never thought about before, but that's a fun fight. So I think he gets it.
Man, Nick, you were waxing poetic about life there for a second. You're such a wise young man. I'm old enough to be your older cousin, for goodness sake.
Maybe even my dad. I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm not. Okay,
maybe not quite much. Yeah.
Okay, settle down. I'm old enough to be your older cousin. Okay, you can't be giving me life advice, but I agree. I think, like I said, I as much as I said he doesn't get it, I'd want to see the fight. Should it happen?
I probably should never give anybody life advice when it comes to doing this podcast or on Twitter, because I'm probably the youngest. But no one younger than me follows me. So
maybe Jed. I think he could use a little guidance sometimes.
Once in a while. That's why I have him on the show so much when Andrew Lawrence, my real host, can't do the show, because that's sort of the purpose. I mean, let's teach Jed. Let's get him straight line, focused, not
free
going
therapy.
off.
You give me a little free therapy.
Yes, he needs.
It's how we're Canadian. It's how we do. It's how we do in Canada.
What therapy? What did you say?
Is it free? Give me some just free.
Yes.
Therapy, free advice.
He, as an American, is not used to free therapy or healthcare or anything. So
Canadian style.
All right, that is it. Episode 171 of the MMA Circus is in the books. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the show, go give us a thumbs up down there. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, the MMA Circus, down there. Any feedback for the show, good or bad, drop a message in the comment section down below, and I will reply to you if needed. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. It was great talking to you for the first time. I'm sure it won't be the last. I know it won't be the last, because we'll be meeting each other in just a mere 5 days.
Yes.
Plug away. You will be in UFC Calgary. I will be in UFC Calgary. We will both be there. It'll be a lot of fun. But as far as what you got going on now, and of course all your social media and whatnot, your coverage of the great sport of mixed martial arts, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just follow my work and the great crew at MMA Fighting. We're always doing great things. And yes, myself and Mark Ramondi and the talented Esther Lynn and Casey Leiden will be there doing their amazing photo and video work in Calgary next week. And you can follow me on Twitter at Alexander K. Lee. And I don't really use Instagram, not that I would want anyone to see anyway. So it's all nonsense. So yeah, please follow me on Twitter though. I love Twitter. I'm an active tweeter. And keep following MMA Fighting. And to give you a plug, Bloody Elbow and Nick's work, of course.
All right, you guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. As Alex just said, all of my work can be found over at bloodyelbow.com. If you do want to see all of my UFC Calgary stuff, though, you'll have to go to the Severe MMA's YouTube channel, just like you had to for my 226 and Tough 27 finale work earlier this month, youtube.com/Severe Art. So I will be covering UFC Calgary for Severe MMA, not Bloody Elbow, but that is okay. I think that's pretty much it. You can find the MMA Circus on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Player FM, Overcast, Podcast Addict, pretty much anywhere else you can find a podcast. Go subscribe, like us, favorite us, give us a review. As I said, I'd appreciate that greatly. For Alex K. Lee, I am Nick Baldwin, and we are out.